The Good Samaritan. When I found out that this was the passage that I was to preach, I did what I normally do, and I had a look at what others have to say about the passage in the past. Imagine my horror as I discovered that this passage is known by some as the preacher's nightmare. Well, thanks for that, giving me the preacher's nightmare to preach. I don't know if that's a cruel joke or a vote of confidence. But the good news is that it's called the preacher's nightmare because just about everyone knows the story. I mean, it's so well known that it's part of the language. We talk about people being good Samaritans. Just about any time someone goes out of their way to do something nice for someone else. Most people will have an idea of what the story is about, so it's thought that it's really hard to come up with something new to say about it, which is fine by me. I'll just content myself with saying some old things about it. Because while this is an old story, and many of us are familiar with it, reading it now in the 21st century, we may not see just how scandalous and shocking this story was when Jesus told it. Or if we are shocked, we might be shocked by completely different things to them. For instance, the story starts with someone getting beaten up and dumped on the side of the road. That's pretty shocking right away, isn't it? Not so much for a first century Jew. When Jesus told the story, most of the people listening would have most likely had a particular road in mind. The name of that road, roughly translated, is Blood Pass. People got beaten up and robbed on that road so often that it was actually named for it. Jesus' listeners wouldn't have been shocked by that at all. Of course the man was jumped on the road. What else would you expect? And while the thought of someone being left on the side of the road, especially by a priest or a religious leader, is personally shocking to me, that probably wasn't very shocking to a biblical Jew either. I suppose if I think about it, I shouldn't really be surprised about good people avoiding a beaten up man on the side of a dangerous road. I've watched enough old westerns and post-apocalyptic movies to recognise the cliche. A man lying by the side of the road, someone, a good Samaritan, goes over to help, and next thing you know, the supposed victim has a weapon and is robbing the would-be helper. It's a cliche for a reason. It happened a lot. It still happens from time to time if you're unlucky. There's more than enough stories about people stopping to help and ending up caught in some drama where they get hurt or robbed. No. The surprise here is not that people walked past. The surprise here is that anyone actually stopped. Not only that someone stopped, but it was a Samaritan. For us, Samaritan means something good. There's a pretty famous organisation that's just known as the Samaritans these days. They don't need to put the good at the front of the name. We know the Samaritans do good work. But in Jesus' day, whoa, that's a totally different story. The Samaritans were actually close cousins to the Judeans. They could trace their history to common ancestors back around the time of Joshua and actually all the way back to Joseph. But they split at some stage. When a priest went and set up a replica altar to God on another mountain and turmoil ensued. Think something like the split of the Church of England from the Roman Catholic Church. Something like that. So while they were sort of descended from the same people, the Samaritans worshipped differently, they had a different government, basically set up as a separate but neighbouring country. In the eyes of the Judeans, they were apostate, heretics. In the ladder of social ranking, it went priests, Levites, regular Jews, tax collectors, sinners, outcasts like the lepers and the unclean, and then the Samaritans. The only people more on the outer were the Gentiles, and particularly the Romans who were oppressing Judea. But you had to show respect to the Gentiles. They had political power. The Samaritans didn't. Take a look at the end of the story. You might notice how the lawyer can't even bring himself to name the Samaritan. When Jesus asks who the neighbour is, the lawyer says, the one who showed mercy. That's how much he thought of the Samaritans. He wouldn't even say the name. Now, with that in mind, look at what the Samaritan did. He tended the wounds of someone who he had every reason to believe hated him. That's mercy. What he does next is where grace comes in. Because grace, when all is said and done, comes from a certain unexpectedness. Mercy is where someone with the power to forgives or doesn't claim what is rightfully theirs. That's not to be expected, but it's not unheard of. Grace is a movement beyond that. What the Samaritan did next in taking the beat-up man to a safe place and paying to make sure that he stays safe is an act of grace, an undeserved extra mile that put the Samaritan in danger himself. Think about this. Any Judean who saw them on the way was just as likely to believe that a no good Samaritan had done the damage to the man himself, rather than believe that he was helping. Now, the closest thing I could think of in modern times might be if we replaced the Samaritan with a Palestinian. Think a Palestinian helping an Israeli in the same way. Do you see it now? Very dangerous. The people listening to Jesus tell the story would have cottoned on to that, and they would have been shaken by the idea of what he said. Now, I said that it was an undeserved extra mile, and it was undeserved. The beat-up man was from a nation that the Samaritan should have thought of as his oppressor. But Jesus has him helping, looking past the politics, the differences in faith, the differences in ethnic grouping, and has the Samaritan simply seeing a fellow human being. And for me, that is the start of grace. Looking beyond what we're owed, looking beyond the differences, looking beyond the labels, and then while we're looking beyond what a person deserves, going that extra little bit and trying to find what a person needs but doesn't necessarily deserve. And then finding that for them or helping them to find it in the same way that the Samaritan did. On the night before Martin Luther King was assassinated, he was actually preaching on this exact passage. There's a couple of questions from his sermon that I think sums up beautifully what is at the beginning of grace that I want to leave you with today. I want you to take this into your next week, to your fruitfulness on the front lines groups, to whatever front lines you have for you to ponder and to practice as a starting point for grace. And here it is. Martin Luther King said, "It's possible that those men were afraid. It's possible that the priest and the Levite looked over that man on the ground and wondered if the robbers were still around. Or it's possible that they felt that the man on the ground was merely faking it in order to seize them. And so the first question that the priest asked, the first question that the Levite asked was, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? But then the Good Samaritan came. And he reversed the question. If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to them?